Welcome to the third episode of Backlog Monologue. If this is your first time watching one of these, this series is basically an excuse for myself to try to play more games that are in my backlog and be able to make a video out of them without having to dedicate time to making a full-fledged review. These videos are more rambly and podcast focused, so the footage on screen isn't always going to be reflecting what I'm talking about, so it doesn't really matter if you're watching the gameplay or not. Since I'm going to be talking about any aspect of these games, there is a table of contents in the description below, so you can jump around if you don't want to be spoiled on certain games you haven't played yet. But before I get into talking about these games, I usually take some time to talk about what I've been currently working on and the near future expectations for the channel. So at the time of recording, I've been really stuck on writing the Hitman 3 review. In the current iteration of the script, I do talk about how I feel kind of burnt out on the Hitman formula, and while I like the game, I don't really feel like I'm enjoying it as much as I feel I should. I look at these things and I'm like, wow, this is really cool, but it isn't blowing me away anymore, and I don't know if that's just because I'm tired of the formula. I'm burnt out from doing the retrospective series last year because it was only a few months ago that I'd put like at least 200 hours into making all of those videos between playing, writing, recording, and editing those videos, or the fact that I'm just tired of these games. I still think it's good. Like, I can't point to anything and go, yeah, that's bad. This is why I don't like this. So that's what's making it so difficult for me to find the words and how to articulate it. I've actually started to feel kind of conflicted on this Backlog Monologue series, especially with some of the games I want to include. I'm just going to spoil it now for those who didn't look at the table of contents that I'm going to be talking about Cruelty Squad in this video. That's one of those games that I feel like could be its own review, and it would probably end up doing better than this video. I know I don't have that much of a sample size, but these Backlog Monologues only average about like at most 10k views, and I feel like I could probably get more if I did an independent video on Cruelty Squad. That's also how I feel about some other games I bring up in this video, like Shaddai and the Berserk PS2 game. I think what I'm going to end up doing is just talk about them anyway in this video, and since these get not that many views, it won't be that bad that I end up repeating myself in an eventual review if I do end up making it. As for what I'm working on currently besides the Hitman 3 review, I've been torn between which retrospective I've actually wanted to work on. I've been debating between Yakuza 2 and Drakengard 1. I'm really happy that everyone seems to be super excited and anticipating the Yakuza 2 retrospective. I'm honestly grateful for that. It's a video series that I'm really excited and really motivated to do, so it's nice to see that others are actually excited and want to watch it. As of right now, I want to do the Drakengard 1 retrospective first just because I think it would be faster and easier to get out compared to the Yakuza 2 retrospective. Since for Yakuza 2, it's going to be like the first one where I'm going to play the original on the PlayStation 2, and I'm going to be playing Kiwami 2. And for this, I think I'm going to be playing Kiwami 2 twice at least. Once on the PS4, which is at 30 FPS, and then once on the PC at 60 FPS with mods that improve the combat to contrast a lot of that game's combat issues. That's going to take a lot of work. And honestly, when I work on super long videos that I feel like I'm not making much progress in and take a long time to make, I get really stressed out and get super demotivated. Like in the first Backlog Monologue where I'm talking about, oh, hey, I haven't put out the first Yakuza video yet and it's taking super long. What ended up happening was I was so stressed out by the video that I ended up finishing it except for putting music in it, and then just had to take a mental break for a bit, and then just spent a whole month off and didn't work on videos at all. And honestly, I'm glad for that because I came back and fixed up a few things and it ended up coming out great and everyone loved it, at least from the reception I've seen. I have a lot to say about Yakuza 2, Kiwami 2, and Drakengard, so I'm really excited to talk about them, but because I'm so excited and I really like these games and want to make the videos super good, it feels really intimidating and it's kind of stressing me out to work on them and just think about working on them. And sometimes it just ends up, wow, I spent the whole day and got really nothing done. I just stressed out more than actual working, which sucks, but I guess that's part of the creative process. I haven't figured out how to work around that. The other retrospective that I've talked a bit about on and off on Twitter that I want to do this year, I don't have a definitive date yet, is the Berserk retrospective. I really just want to make this my magnum opus, which sounds incredibly stupid and unwise to anybody who's like, yeah, don't put all of your eggs into one basket being like, this is the best thing I'm ever going to make. But there's something special about Berserk that I just want to convey in this video. It's going to be a massive video, which is why it doesn't have a definitive date yet. For all I know, it might not even come out this year because I feel like I won't be ready to make it, which is what happened last year. Last year I was going, I'm going to make this video and it's going to be great. And then I just felt, you know what? I'm not at a skill level yet where I feel like I can do this video justice and make what I want to make with it. So I'd rather put it on the back burner and gain more experience by doing other videos because, YouTube is a learning experience. I started this shit knowing absolutely fucking nothing. 2016 to 2018 me would be like, nah, I know what I'm doing. No, I fucking didn't. I didn't know what I was doing. Not like I really know what I'm doing now. I'm still just kind of going through the motions at times, but I feel like I have gotten better and hopefully it will come out this year and it'll be fucking amazing. So at the start of this year, I had a really big boomer shooter kick. During the Christmas sale, I ended up buying a lot of retro-styled FPSs, and I had this really crackhead video idea where I was like, oh, I'm gonna review every single boomer shooter FPS revival game that's come out recently all in one video. And I listed all of them, and it was like 40 games. Granted, a bunch of them aren't even out yet, but most of them have mentioned wanting to try to get into early access in 2021. But in reality, this is just a stupid idea, and I would be better off just splitting it up into multiple videos, because at some point, I'm just going to be repeating the same things about these games. Like the music's good, the guns feel good, the sound design's good, and it would feel repetitious and it would just be super long. I don't think anyone would want to watch like a 5-hour video of just reviewing every single boomer shooter out right now, but maybe I'll go back to the drawing board with it. I don't know. The first of these boomer shooter revival games that I played was Prodeus, which entered early access at the end of last year. This one is really on the classic Doom inspired end of the spectrum. With Doom going off in its own direction with 2016 and Eternal, it's really refreshing to play something that feels like a new classic Doom game. The sprite work is really good. I love the blood effects in the game, especially how they affect your map. The early access version that's currently available has 9 weapons and all of them have great feedback to them, though some of the sound design could use a little work with the shotguns. Currently you have a pump action with its alt-fire being a charge shot and a quadruple barrel with its alt-fire allowing you to fire all 4 barrels at once. My complaint with them is that the alt-fire and primary fires for both of these guns are identical. I want the fact that I'm shooting 4 barrels at once to be ear-deafening. Realistically, this is a pretty minor nitpicky complaint, but I would like to see it changed in an update or in a full release. I think there are a good variety of weapons in this game, which is really important for these boomer shooter revival games in my opinion. There are a few of them that just don't really go that crazy outside the box with the weapons, and it ends up feeling kind of samey. I always find myself far more interested in playing the ones with weird and out there ideas for their weapons, especially when it comes to alt-fires. While this game doesn't do anything too crazy, I do think the lineup is really good. My favorite weapon currently is the plasma rifle that shoots blue SpaghettiOs. I do wish that the dual SMGs and the minigun had some more incentives to differentiate between each other since they share the same ammo type. Maybe the minigun could have a different alt-fire, or maybe the SMGs could have some sort of modifier. Maybe it's already in the game and I just don't notice it yet, but as of right now I really felt like, why would I use one over the other? At first, the level design doesn't seem anything that crazy and stand out, but I think its simplicity and how well it's executed and formatted makes it really fun, especially with how fun mobility is, though I would absolutely love to see some more varied locations in future updates, since everything in the game right now is kind of just Space Factory with lava, or acid, or some other hazard on the ground in a few areas. The biggest thing I would like to see changed in future updates is the game's AI. So many times it felt like they just didn't know where I was or just stood in circles and walked in circles and couldn't figure out what to do. Normally on my first playthrough of any game I just play on normal difficulty because 99% of the time that is the most balanced and what is designed to be your first experience playing the game. But enemies felt like they were putting up 0 challenge, but then I bumped it up to hard and even then it didn't really feel like the game was giving me that much pushback as I was hoping. Hopefully with more updates and an eventual full release this will be addressed, but I hope they don't go a very binary route of just increasing damage numbers for higher difficulties. I find that is always the most boring way to create a challenge. I hope enemies just become way more aggressive. You could pick up the early access for $25, I believe, which might sound like a lot, but there is a decent amount of content in the game right now, and there's a lot of replay value. The next boomer shooter on the list that I played is another one that's currently in early access, and that's Wrath, Aeon of Ruin. This one I am far more mixed on compared to Prodeus. It does have some really good stuff and some promise, but I feel kind of on it. Maybe I'm just too much of a zoomer, or stupid. That's probably it. But I found myself being kind of lost a lot of the time with these levels. A lot of it is big, open, spacious areas with enemies sprinkled about seemingly haphazardly. It just makes the levels feel really barren and empty. I kept finding myself not knowing what the game wanted me to do. You just start the game up and it just dumps you in a hub and I go, what am I doing? What does the game want me to do? The game feels a little too aimless right now, though I do want to mention that there has been a content update since I last played, so maybe this has been addressed. I really like the shotgun in this game. It just has this very visceral, crunchy feedback to it. The other weapons are also pretty cool. They do basically fit the archetype of SMG, pistol, and grenade launcher, but their designs are super interesting, so that keeps them engaging, along with having some pretty neat alt fires. I also really like the melee weapon in this game, especially with the fact that you could use its charge attack to fly over gaps and use it to platform. I imagine speedruns will look really cool with this blade in the final release. Like Prodeus, its AI is kind of underwhelming and pretty stupid at times, with enemies getting caught on things or just completely ignoring me. Cacodemon equivalent was the worst offender of this. The damage is pretty high, so maybe if they were too aggressive it would be really annoying, so ideally maybe they would lower the damage enemies deal to you while making them more aggressive and smarter. While I am overall optimistic on this game, I think right now you should probably hold off on buying it if you're interested. Next up is Ion Fury, the 3D Realms game that is basically Duke Nukem without the Duke Nukem IP. Playing the build engine again feels so fucking good. Interacting with all sorts of silly shit in the environment is never not fun in these types of games. I absolutely love how fast you are in this game. I wish I had a better way to describe and articulate how fun the movement feels. Bunny hopping through chaotic firefights and just zipping through levels. It's so seamless and smooth. It actually can be kind of disorienting because you're so fast that I have to keep readjusting my aim because I'll end up overshooting myself, though the fall damage kind of ruins some of the momentum for me. For a while now I've been lamenting the death of Duke Nukem and how Randy Pitchford keeps the IP locked behind closed doors, but 3D Realms went out and just said, fuck it, we'll make our own Duke Nukem game, and it fucking rules. This is the Duke Nukem forever we should have gotten. I do want to mention that you should probably limit the frame rate to 60 FPS and turn on VSync because I didn't, and for the longest time I was having horrible screen tearing throughout the game. You don't see it in the capture of the footage that's on screen right now, but oh god, it was kind of unplayable in some areas. At the time of recording, I haven't played through the entirety of the game, so I don't think I've collected all of the weapons yet, but from what I've seen, I really like the selection. Though the revolver feels kind of overtuned with its alt fire that is like McCree's High Noon that marks an enemy and then you just automatically shoot them and basic enemies die in one hit to this. But it does feel kind of necessary to deal with some of the smaller enemies you'll encounter like the heads on spider legs or the flying drones because their hitboxes are kind of wonky at times where I felt like I was shooting them but it wasn't taking any damage. I feel like this game has captured the same energy that Duke Nukem had from a writing perspective. A lot of cheesy one-liners and references to movies, along with a comically evil villain. 3D Realms has an expansion currently in the work that I'm really excited for. I believe it's going to have some dinosaurs in it, which is really cool. Video games need to let you fight dinosaurs again, damn it. Around like 2012 to 2014, we started seeing a revival of that with indie multiplayer games on Steam like Primal Carnage and Orion, but I really want a new Dino Crisis or Turok game. There is that retro FPS that's styled like a PS1 game coming to Steam called Compound Fracture that I'm really looking forward to, but it doesn't have a release date as of right now. I definitely need to get back and finish Ion Fury, it's just I've been distracted lately. It's just really annoying that this game doesn't work well with shadow play, so I had to wake OBS from what I was hoping it would be its eternal slumber. Pick this game up if you like Duke Nukem. Next up is New Bloods Amid Evil, their Heretic-inspired retro FPS, and oh my god is this game gorgeous. It has so much sprawling and interesting level design to it. Though I do want to get my one complaint out of the way with this game, it felt like there was never enough enemies to my liking that I was fighting at any given time. Maybe because I just got off of playing Ultra Kill and Doom again for the Game of the Year video right before playing it, but I always felt like, man, I wish I was just being attacked by more enemies at once. I ended up bumping the difficulty up again, and and still feeling kind of unsatisfied. Like you're fighting in these giant 3D modeled MC Escher paintings, but you're never really fighting that many enemies at any given time, so it makes them feel really barren, empty, and underutilized. I also found the fonts to be kind of hard to read in certain environments. They just blend in with the background colors and ended up being really hard to read, especially ones that were only on screen for a few seconds. If you've noticed the pattern on how I talk about these retro FPS games, the ones that I like the most always have unique weapons, and goddamn does this game have some really unique ones, especially when you use the supercharge ability, which modifies your weapon's firing properties. You have a staff that shoots what I believe is either moons or planets and they explode. When using the supercharge, your mace becomes a helicopter blade that spins at people and just turns them into mulch. The BFG equivalent of this game is this weird mass of purple and pink shapes that just pulsate and move in this very unnatural way. My personal favorite is the mace that throws chunks of ice that pin enemies to walls. There's not really much else I have to say about the game, it's just really solid. New Blood so far has had an amazing track record with what they've put out and produced, so if you've liked their other stuff or really like Heretic, maybe check this one out. The final one of these boomer shooters I played is HROT, or HROT, or however the fuck you say it. This is the one I've admittedly put the least amount of time in. At the time of recording, I've only played about 80 minutes of it, but for what I've played so far, I really enjoyed it. For a game with a color palette that you could count on one hand, it has this amazing, unsettling atmosphere to it. It feels so cold and unwelcoming, but ironically enough, that's what draws me into its world. I really dig the aesthetic this game is going for. I believe this is supposed to be emulating PS1 style graphics, but I could be wrong here. While the sound effects aren't the harshest and have the most impact, they're oddly very satisfying. Like the shotgun sounds good, and I love the little ticking ding sound that your sickle makes when you hit things, specifically things that you could break in the environment. The one thing I'm kind of unclear on is how damage works in this game. Sometimes I'll one-tap an enemy with a shotgun, and other times it'll take multiple hits. Despite being at a similar to the same range, and in some cases even closer, I don't know if it's just because the angle I'm attacking them from, so all the pellets in the shotgun spread don't end up hitting them. It's not the biggest deal in the world, but it's something I couldn't help but notice. I really adore the fact that all the bosses that I've encountered so far are these weird monsters that feel really out of place. Like you fight a wooden horse, something that looks kind of like a gorilla statue, a forklift. Funnily enough, the forklift actually got a cheap kill on me, which I found really funny. It only aggroes once you pick some ammo up right in front of it, and I happened to just back over it, so the forklift ended up killing me from behind, leaving me going, what the fuck was that? The one thing I like to see in future updates for the game is less sewer levels and more stuff that's having you go through urban environments. My favorite parts so far are where you're going through apartment buildings, the butcher shop, things that feel almost normal, but they always have this weird offset to them that makes them feel really uncomfortable, which is kind of how you could just describe the entire environments of this game. Everything on the surface at a glance looks normal while being a little dreary, but then on closer inspection, things are just slightly unnaturally off. I have really high hopes for the completed version of this game. What's in it so far is great, and I wait excited to see the full release. For some reason, I had the desire to play through all of Postal 2 and its DLCs. I don't think I've actually, by myself, played through the entirety of Postal 2. I definitely know everything that happens in it, but that's probably because of reviews and Let's Plays that I've watched or watching friends play through it. Basically, anything past Wednesday has always just kind of been a blur in my mind, because usually after Wednesday, I just kind of get bored with the game. Postal 2 is always at its best when it leans in on the absurdist nature of the game, which is why I really like the second DLC, Paradise Lost. When Postal 2 is at its worst, it's when it's really formulaic, with jokes and gags that became outdated only a few months after its release. So playing it so many years removed, I struggle sometimes to remember what the fuck they're supposed to be referencing. Even its best parts still follow this formula, but they're layered under enough of its absurdist nature and its early 2000s gross out and offensive comedy. A lot of the guns feel way worse than I remembered. The only weapon that I consistently felt that was fun to use was the game's double barrel shotgun, which isn't even in the DLCs to my knowledge. For a game made in Unreal Engine 2, the melee is actually really satisfying. Using the map in this game is absolutely insufferable. It takes so long to open and close it, it always feels in the way whenever you want to use it. This game probably has one of my favorite overheal mechanics in video games. When you smoke crack, your health goes up to 125. Normally 100 is the limit, but after a while you'll have withdrawals, which then makes you take some damage unless you smoke some more crack. So you're upfront getting a bonus now, but you're always needing to keep yourself supplied with more crack, which then leads into using more of your money or scrounging around, which takes up more of your time that you could be spending doing actual objectives. Honestly, the first DLC, Apocalypse Weekend, is pretty abysmal. It starts out pretty good with some neat ideas like the head trauma that makes things into a Silent Hill nightmare world, but it quickly devolves into just being a crappy corridor shooter for 90% of its playtime, along with some really annoying platforming. Honestly, I have no fucking clue how they managed to make this DLC. This is something that could absolutely not come out now, where the in-game devs send Postal dude to shoot up the office of their previous publishers and get back their gold master disc of the game, with a cartoonish mustache-trailing caricature of who I assume is the publisher's CEO. It's like if Visceral Games made a DLC where there was a necromorph outbreak in the EA headquarters and they had Isaac Clarke stomp in the skull of a necromorph version of John Riccitiello, with the DLC ending off having the Postal dude place a nuke inside the office and driving off into the sunset. The second DLC is far more enjoyable, Paradise Lost, which came out, I believe, 11 years after the original release of the game, as an apology for Postal 3. For a DLC that came out in 2015, I believe, it feels like it came out in 2004. Their sense of humor hasn't aged a bit. That's either a good thing or a bad thing depending on your stance on Postal. It's way more silly and has you doing chores and objectives more in line with the starting days of the base game. It still has the annoying sections similar to Apocalypse Weekend where it turns into shooting galleries, like where you have to fight all the toilets that you need to piss in and you're in an arena that lasts for 20 fucking minutes, or the military camp that has an absurd difficulty spike, where I was stuck for at least an hour trying to fight my way through all these towers filled with guys shooting rocket launchers faster than I ever could, which is fucking bullshit. I loved the DLC's approach of reincorporating the Postal dude from Postal 3 since he has a different voice and he's portrayed as an evil alternate version of you in this game, which then is exorcised from your body and is off running around doing evil deeds, which then gets you in trouble with groups that you had no affiliation with. Overall, I think it's pretty good, and I think it's really charming how they're repurposing all of the pre-existing game assets so they can create what is basically a new map. I own Postal 4, but I haven't given it a try yet since by their own admission it is in a janky alpha and is only up to Wednesday. I'll probably get around to play it once they add Friday. The final FPS that I played in this roundup is Cruelty Squad. This game is basically every mid-2000s Adult Swim cartoon that played at 1 AM condensed into a 3D video game. It's a tactical, immersive sim FPS with tons of ways to approach how to kill targets. This game has a weird, cryptic energy to it that I haven't experienced in maybe ever? I honestly struggle to think of something off the top of my head that rivals or matches its chaotic and cryptic energy. Like, the game has a stock market that I think I maybe understand at this point. I honestly don't know. It's just as confusing as the real stock market. You can talk to NPCs and levels and they sound like demonic Animal Crossing characters. A lot of them inform you about how the world works, but others speak to you in Xavier Renegade Angel riddles. I kind of wish that the weapons had more impact and crunch to them, especially in the sound department. They feel a little lacking for my liking. My only real complaint that I would love to see addressed in an update is I would like them to add the ability to toggle leaning in the settings menu, because holding the E key while trying to shift around a corner to peek it while pressing the D key is incredibly awkward and often is useless and is not even worth trying to attempt to do, because you'll just shift in a not so useful way and then end up taking free damage, and damage values are very high. This game is incredibly weird and hard to talk about, so I think I'm going to cut it off here because honestly I don't know what else to say and how to analyze this game. I'm really excited to see the full release, and if it stays at this level of quality, it'll probably be on my Game of the Year list for 2021. El Shaddai was a game that I wanted to make a video on last year, but ended up pushing it back after the studio announced it was going to have a PC port, which just got announced while recording this video that it's coming out next month in April, so maybe I'll do it sometime around there or slightly after. No promises because I constantly change my mind about what videos I'm going to be working on, so yeah, I'm trying to stop that because I go back and watch some old videos and I'm like, man, I didn't do that. I just went and did a different video instead because I changed my mind. Anyways, El Shaddai is a third-person action game where you play as Enoch, working for God to recover the fallen angels who have come to Earth. This game, I describe it to friends as mechanically deep as a shot glass, but is one of the most visually unique games I've ever played. The gameplay on screen right now is just in the second area, and each area you progress to has a completely different tone and art style, some of which change even perspectives as the game becomes a side-scrolling platformer in a few cases. This game's presentation and atmosphere is phenomenal. It actually kind of reminds me of Nier Gestalt in a few places. I'm genuinely surprised that we're getting a PC port of this game because I thought it was just going to be something that was tied to the Xbox 360 and PS3 forever, as the company that developed this game and its publisher went out of business in 2012, I believe. It's a real shame that we never got a sequel for this game that could have built on it iteratively, because it's kind of stiff in a few places. You have your few basic attacks for each weapon and maybe an air combo and a special property added to your jump. You're tied to one weapon at any given time, and the only way to access the other two is to steal them off of enemies you're currently fighting, or grabbing them when they're presented to you in the environment. I love how this game doesn't have a HUD, and instead of a health bar, it is your armor, which breaks off as you take more damage. It's such a nice, diegetic, and immersive way to present the health bar to the player. The voice acting in this game is really good, having Jason Isaac play as Lucifer, who is accompanying you on your journey and works as your save station while he talks to God on his cell phone. I hope the PC port of this is really good because I want to see this game in 4K. Recently, I picked up a modded PlayStation 2 that would allow me to play games from any region. Once it finally arrived, I wanted to play the Berserk PS2 game on my TV instead of emulating it. So that's why the footage on screen is in Japanese and I'm not using the English patch. Because it's modded, I can burn a disc and use the English patch then, and play it on actual hardware, which I might do, but that seems a little bit of work, and I don't have a disc drive to my PC, so I don't really know how I'm going to be burning a disc. Goddamn, is this game awesome. It's so fucking cool. It strikes the perfect balance in conveying the weight of playing as Guts. It's not super weightless, kinda like the Musou game or any other poorly made third-person action game, and it's not incredibly slow and heavy to the point where it's unsatisfying, like trying to use a heavy weapon in Drakengard 3. This game still holds up great visually, which is kind of unsurprising because, you know, it's from the PlayStation 2 era, the best era, when game developers figured out how to make things look more realistic, but because of hardware limitations, they still had this offset of artificiality. Like when you enter a house in a PlayStation 2 game, it looks like a house, but everything is slightly off in proportions and size that it feels somewhat unnatural, and I love that feeling. I love that look and aesthetic. I am so sad it's gone away. It's the idea that things look good enough to convey what they are, but also your brain is doing a lot of filling in the blanks and heavy lifting with your imagination. I don't care what anyone says, I'll take a game that looks like this than any high fidelity, super realistic game any day of the week. One thing that is absolutely amazing about this game is in cutscenes how they convey the rage of Guts and make it look similar to the shading and lighting of the manga panels. Like on the hill when he's talking to Griffith in the grave of all of the Band of the Hawk. When Guts gets angry, they actually shade him different and change how his eyes look on the model, and it looks so fucking good. Unlike the Musou game, the boss fights here are actually really fun. Firstly, they actually react to you hitting them instead of acting like a giant fucking mountain that you're punching. The game has a really fun counter and reversal system, so boss fights are really interactive. You have a rage meter which you can activate that speeds up your attacks and lets you go ape shit, which then makes things seem really fucking fluid and nice. I fucking love the rage system in this game. It's so much fun to use. The sound design is really good, so your sword clanging off of enemies feels good instead of the shitty anime sound effects. Your arm cannon is ear deafening like it should be. This game just fucking rules. It's that simple. The biggest weakness is that the levels between the boss fights can be kind of boring. If you have not played this, absolutely emulate it. I plan to dive deeper into this game in a full-fledged review eventually. So it's been a decent amount of time since I last played Resident Evil 4, and I really had the itch to go back and replay it. Yep, it still holds up, still great, still one of the best games ever. This is one of, if not the only, perfectly paced video games. Like, even when there's downtime in this game, it feels very purposeful. It sets the tone and atmosphere and gives you a little bit of time to breathe, but not too much to the point where you get bored or your mind starts to wander. I honestly don't see a point in having an RE4 remake because this game is perfect. What is there to change or improve on? I know someone's going to be like, well, you can make it so you can move and shoot. But RE4's whole design is built around the idea that you have to stand still and do precise aiming. And this game already has the HD texture restoration fan mod being made, which is redrawing all of the textures of this game based on what Capcom was originally referencing. What are they going to do for this remake? Just make it super high fidelity? I really don't want that. I think the game, even without the mod, which isn't in the gameplay shown on screen now, looks fine. Some things are admittedly blurry, but it's still part of the charm. I think this game looks great. I love organizing my inventory in the attaché case. I love all of the goofy and campy B-movie action dialogue this game has. I honestly forgot how sassy Leon was in this game. Just a really fucking good game. I don't know what else to say. This game has been talked to death. If you're one of the few people who haven't played it, pick it up on Steam. I believe it's available on every console known to man, even the Zebo. So yeah, there's like no excuse not to play it. At the end of my Game of the Year video, I mentioned how one of the games I was looking forward to in 2021 was the PC port of Nioh 2. At the time of recording, I've put about 10 hours into the game, and so far I am absolutely loving it. All of the new weapons are amazing. They're so much fun that it makes it difficult for me to decide what kind of build I want to make, because I just keep jumping back and forth between all of the weapons. I really wish they just allowed you to use 3 or 4 active weapons at once, because I'm stuck between using the switchglaive, the boxing gloves, the dual hatchets, and the split staff. All of these weapons are so much fun. The switchglaive in high stance is a scythe, in mid stance it's a naginata, and then in bottom stance, it's that saw cleaver axe type thing that's on the cover of Bloodborne. The split staff is cool, but it takes some time to actually get to the interesting moveset that it has, because as soon as you start, it's very basic, and anything that is unique about it is locked behind progression. It's not nearly as bad once you actually look at it, but the first impression of the progression perk tree is horrible. It just seems overwhelming at first glance. In reality, it's not that bad, but I could completely understand when a few people I know saw that and went, yeah, I really am not interested in dealing with that at all. I also love all of the new demon abilities that have been added to the game. You know me, I love me a good parry, and the demon parry is always so satisfying to land. The customizable 2 demon attacks you get have been pretty cool, but I haven't seen any that are that useful yet. There's been some fun ones like the throwing of the monkey staff and summoning the giant snake, but I hope some of the late game ones get really crazy. I assume they will, because by the end of Nioh 1 you had some really crazy abilities, especially in the DLC. The devil trigger form you have is really cool, but as of right now, it still feels like it takes way too long to actually gain access to. I guess they made it this way so you couldn't abuse it and constantly spam the living weapon form, because that was something that was incredibly broken in the first game, but I really just want to turn into a demon. It's super cool. I love using the one with the club and just going full monkey. I love when you sheath your weapons, you flick all the blood off them. This is a really cool holdover from Ninja Gaiden. It's just a super cool detail that I always love when games do. I do have some complaints about the game so far. I really dislike how a bunch of the enemies in the first area all have that same stun move that the bat boss from the first game had. That thing is always so annoying to get hit by. Between the snake ladies, the little imps that throw the doo-doo that leaves a puddle on the ground that if you step in it too long then you're paused, and the only way to break out of it is what feels like an eternity or getting hit by one of the enemies. I also really dislike the create a character silent protagonist. I've definitely talked about this at other points. I don't think on any videos on my channel, maybe on Twitter or when I was guesting on a few people's live streams, but especially for Japanese games, I'm not really a fan of create a character silent protagonists. I always find it more compelling when they write a character. I don't really self-insert when they do these kind of create a character things, so it always falls pretty flat for me. William from the first game may not have been the most compelling character ever, but this game's ridiculous lengths it goes to have you not speak in cutscenes is really stupid and distracting. I really would have just rather had its own character, but I guess I could just play as Kazuma Kiryu now and pretend this is Ishin. I'm really excited to get through the rest of this game and sink my teeth into its systems. I've just sadly been distracted by other projects and other games coming out that I've ended up not playing it for a few weeks. If you've made it this far into the video, I just want to say thanks for watching as always. This is just some holdover content, so I hope you enjoyed it while I work on some of my larger videos, because those take time, sadly. And like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, have been having a lot of motivational issues and stuff with working on videos and finding the drive to put tons of hours into things. I decided to do a little experimenting with this video, thanks to the help of Tsnakerer, whose channel I'll link in the description below. He helped me set up my computer so I can record gameplay on it without it getting interfered cleared by things like YouTube videos or movies that I have on the side. So when I'm going out and collecting footage for videos like this where it doesn't really matter, I can now play the audio for it in the background lowered. So let me know in the comments below if you prefer that, or if I should just stick to what I did in the previous 2 episodes, which is just playing some generic royalty-free music in the background pretty low, just so there's not a lot of dead air. If you really liked the video, maybe consider becoming a patron on Patreon. I'm now going to shout out my $5 and up patrons who really help support the channel. Bully, Comrade Fox, Lucy the Fox, Near Virgil, Slemph Tingle, Alejandro Benitez, Ben Johnson, Chichometrius, Dusty the Zombie, Ek Frazo, Filthy Finger 69, Fish Kami, Flarbu, Joan Eisen, Joshua DiLarino, Justin Collini, Matthew Elliott, Mitchell, Oods of Nudes, Poke Joke S, Sarah Chan, Star Fox, Some Panda, The Unthinkable, Tyler Schertzer, and William Moore. Thanks so much, guys. It means a lot. If you're a card game player of any kind, I have a TCG Player affiliate link in the description below. Any purchases you make using the link will give me a small kickback, so it's another way to help support the channel. As for what's coming next, I really don't know. I'm trying to juggle a bunch of things. Hopefully I'll have the Hitman 3 review out soon-ish. I've been really stuck on it, like I said at the beginning of the video. I have all the footage for the Drakengard 1 video recorded. I still need to do the Yakuza 2 retrospective. I want to do some multi-reviews on things like Dino Crisis and Onimusha, but who knows if those will be now, or maybe I'll put them off for later. But whatever ends up coming out next, I hope you enjoy, and as always, thanks for watching, and see you next time.